for all the time that I was a lawyer, up until starting my own business, it was a how do we get more women into the big law firms? We're still sub 5% when I started, and now we're still sub 10%, right, at firms, partnership track. Sometimes you can't move the river. Sometimes you have to get in the river and let the river take you where the river's going to take you, right? Rather than try to force change upon some of these institutions that are not going to change or not changing at the speed with which we'd like them to, we got to start our own, right? Absolutely. We got to do our own thing.
Hey everyone, it's Tamara Thompson with Broadcast Your Authority, and I'm super excited for our next guest who flew in from Arizona this morning over here to Vegas, just that quick flight over. We have Juliette Peters, who is the founder of Framework Legal. She's a seasoned business lawyer specializing in transactions. Juliette has guided numerous sellers and buyers through the complexities of buying and selling companies, which is very intriguing to me. Well, I'm like, we're going to have to talk later. Her expertise spans multiple industries, including technology, green energy. She offers unique insights on scaling businesses and navigating legal challenges. But one of the things that really intrigued me about Juliette was her whole power of wanting to be able to help more women in business. She wants to help empower people, and she's really passionate about it. So she's got all these skills and things like that. But when you're really in this mode to really help more women in business, I think that really just helps you shine 10 times more. So I appreciate you for joining us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am so grateful to be here and super excited because I feel like this is kind of a new chapter. When you live in a lawyer box, you really are in a lawyer box, right? Yeah. And so one of the things that I've always been passionate about forever and a day since I can remember is helping women achieve what they want to achieve and breaking through, to really do what they want to do with their lives. And I think as women, we have a lot of roles that we're always juggling. And I think sometimes that you sort of get lost in the roles. Right. And so you need a community of people or a person or several people around you that can really kind of look at what is your heart about, right? What are you here to do? Mm-hmm. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we focus on, I think we for a lot of times people would say, okay, well, what is your purpose? And, you have a lot of people going around saying, what is my purpose? I don't know what my purpose is, right? Yeah. But I think that
just take a test.
Exactly. It's the only or get a coach and say, could you tell me what my purpose is?
They'll turn around. They're like, what is your purpose? Exactly. They're like, I just asked you the same question.
Exactly. That's exactly it. So, anyway, so this is a new start for me. It's a transition for me. One of a gazillion I've made in my professional life, but I'm really excited because I think that someone like me who's a little bit more mature, right, and has been through a lot of seasons of what it means to be a woman in business.
Businesswoman,
yep,
exactly. and that a lot of people need mentorship in that area right now for sure. And so, as you're going through this transition in this period, like what are some of the things that you bring to the table that you've helped people? Can you share some stories of individuals or companies that you've helped that you're going to allow this opportunity to help go into this field too?
Absolutely. Well, I think one of the things is when you work with people who scale their business and then sell it, right? A lot of that work, believe it or not, is psychological. It's less about doing the deal and more about how do you get the person to see themselves as the next version of themselves. Because when you sell your business, right, you're selling a piece of your identity. Mm-hmm. You're selling something that you've built from the ground up. Mm-hmm. And you will see sometimes that people tank their potential sale because they can't see themselves in a different role, right? So one of the things that I am really good at and that I enjoy is helping people sort of that education process that comes as you walk down the road to a sale, and you see yourself being something different than what you are. And you monetize your life's work on top of it. So, and there's a lot of misconceptions around sale. A lot of people don't understand what the process is. So you get people that come to you and they really don't know what they don't know. And so it's allowing them to discover with a little bit of direction. And that's essentially what you do when you're coaching people, right? Is that you help people. I had someone, my week started off this week with another woman lawyer who had been recommended in. And this doesn't happen too much, but she was in the midst of a very, very bad partnership breakup, which anybody who's ever been in business with another human being knows that if you don't do the legwork ahead of time and then you get a challenge, an interpersonal challenge, it can really tank the business because you're on separate roads, right? And, she called in with some really specific questions related to how do I unhook this? Right. But really what she needed was some direction on how she was approaching it. I think she knew in her head she was exacerbating an already bad situation. And she needed that guidance for someone to say, hey, I know how hard this is. I've been down this road myself, which I have, in a breakup of a business. It's very, very painful, right? I get it. I know where you've been. But maybe if you take this tact, you really think that that's what you want to do? Do you really think you want to not give certain information to your partner just because you're feeling very, broken in terms of the trust factor, right? So it's really helping people get to where they know they should be going, but for one reason or another have an impediment in front of them that they can't see past. So, yeah.
I just wanted to ask a little bit more about something you mentioned. So I've seen this several times with friends that are business owners, where they build a business up and then they become attached to that as their identity. And as a girl dad myself, like I obviously want more women in the space of acquisitions and all of that,
right?
Because it's mostly male dominated, right?
100%.
And I've seen this over and over again where they get attached to the business. This is who I am, right? That purpose thing. It's like, well, my business is my purpose. And that can be true, but especially if you're trying to go to acquisitions, it doesn't need to be true. And so what are some of the things that you would maybe talk about with someone where they are kind of attached to their business as this is who I am, but they want to exit, they want to do that next thing?
I mean, there's the practical part of it, and then there's the heart-centered part of it, right? The practical part of it is if you're looking to sell your business, you need to grow it with that in mind, meaning you need a management team. You cannot be the only person in your business. If you're the only person in your business, you have a lifestyle business effectively and not an enterprise business, right? Right.
Yeah.
And so it's not that you can't sell that. There are sometimes people like in a professional services space, CPAs would be a good example where, somebody, a larger party might, buy up a bunch of smaller CPA firms. That is a type of acquisition. So I don't want to say, oh, it's never possible.
Or like a book of business type of thing. Yeah.
But there are steps you must take if you plan to sell your business. And those same steps that you have to take is decentering it from yourself, right? And that's really, really tricky for people who have built it, right?
I have a question on the acquisition side. So we're building to scale at this point. So we work with hundreds of podcasts weekly. We have a team of over 40 team members at this point. And thank you. And we've done this from scratch. And the power of the acquisition part, we've already stepped into the acquisition space. As a female founder myself, I've had multiple conversations with acquiring other podcasting agencies. So we're building our Rolodex from our own marketing efforts and budgeting, but we're also stepping into a space, but we're getting a little bit more creative at this point because now we're having people approach us that have studio spaces and then also production companies, content marketing agencies. And we're at that point where we're like, well, we see this as an opportunity to franchise studio
Mm.
spacing
Yes.
and
Mhm.
podcasting. So we're looking to expand, but we want to acquire other
Yes.
companies that already have the revenue, already have the business
Mhm.
intact, and the EBITDA looks great. And so,
Yeah.
what would you say to someone like myself as we're in this space? Are we doing the right thing where we're at currently? Because eventually we would build to sell the entire company.
Yeah. And I want to give you kudos, first of all, because, we were talking earlier outside in the hallway that, women businesses that hit over $1 million is a teeny fraction of the businesses. Something like 4% of
Mhm.
all businesses, women-owned businesses, scale over $1 million. So first of all, you're in rarefied air, and you're also in rarefied air that as an entrepreneur, you are looking at, okay, well, what can I do to scale and sell? I think personally, for women, acquiring a business is a really smart idea. Not enough women think about that as a growth strategy, and it's a great growth strategy.
As long as they have the systems, processes in place, you've done your research, and it's a smart move on that regard, and you've looked at their numbers and everything else. I got really excited about it because one of my mentors is an acquisition king. And so when I got into that space, I got really excited, but I started having these like crazy conversations, where they're like, you approach it with no money down. I'm like, what? I'm like, there's like weird tricks and tech. I'm like, obviously that doesn't work for all types of companies, but it just made me think bigger. I'm like, what can I offer this, or how can we, generate, revenue to take over the company over time, and that, all this stuff. Like I know you know more better than me.
No, but I mean, I think this kind of goes to the heart of one of the things that I have observed over the decades of working in very, very male-dominated environments, right? No, please don't, But I think that we need to not necessarily follow the pattern of the people before us. And you need to start thinking creatively based on your own ideas and make those happen. So for example, do people grow through acquisition? They absolutely do grow through acquisition. Do people think about necessarily sort of a creative financing of that? No, it's a very traditional environment that requires you going to a bank, which for a woman is tough, right? Because women don't get financed.
Unless you have a male name. I have a client that named Lee, and she showed up, and
interesting.
She showed up, and they thought she was a man, but she came in with all the qualifications, and then they're like, "Oh, what?" I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
It is. That's a great.
She was like, "I'm so proud to have this name."
Well, there have been lots of studies and stories done through the years related to names and the perceptions that we bring with it. And in that case, obviously, that is a name that could have been a man's name, right? Yeah. And so
Tamara, on the other hand,
I'm
exactly.
Not sure about
or
that Juliet.
Juliet,
no man is named Juliet.
We'll just walk in together,
right? Exactly. But I think you hit a really important nail on the head, which is, that is it's a great growth strategy, is to acquire, and creative financing is the way to go. And I think that doesn't have to look like traditional financing. Selling your business doesn't have to look like a traditional sale either. So a lot of people expect they're going to sell to a third party. Somebody's going to come in, offer them money for their business. But that, again, is also real small.
Right.
Group, right? That's 5%. So what's most likely going to happen is people have to close their business because they won't have a seller. Some people grow their seller internally, so they may transition the business to somebody on their team that has an interest in stepping into an ownership role. But if you do that, then you've got to be really conscious that not everybody has the entrepreneurial mindset that they would need to step into that. So that can succeed if you help and coach the person, bring in a coach from the outside to make that transition work. Because that's a tough term from employee to owner. And a lot of times when I have had clients who've done that, it doesn't work well unless you're selecting someone who really does have and can grow into an entrepreneurial mindset, which is not everyone. So
It's very true. I've tried to tell like my business partner and different friends that are entrepreneurs when they're hiring and training and expecting certain things out of people that work for us or work for them. And it's like, if they could do what you do, they wouldn't be working for you, right? They would have their own business. And not that that's always true. Obviously, some people can branch out and do it. But to your point, a lot of people don't necessarily want to or have that entrepreneurial spirit. That's very true.
And one of the things that I found through the years of, and I've kind of been on all sides of the fence, right? I've worked as a lawyer for a large firm. I worked in-house with a company. I ran a big public law agency in Arizona. And then I've owned my own business for the last decades. And I really love working with female entrepreneurs, but there's not a large enough group of them yet, right? Women, I see a lot of women with really scalable businesses, but they're afraid to scale.
I think that's partially, Chiquita, you could jump in on this. It's the mindset. And a lot of business owners, it's just something I've seen when I've been in entrepreneurial groups, even women entrepreneurial groups. There's been, not always, but people are busting through that glass ceiling that it's not there. Like, just bust through it. Your mindset, you've got the limits,
you
right?
got the limit. It's difficult. And ultimately what you're talking about, even for yourself, is doing it scared. You want to do it through fear. And even you stepping onto this other side of, I'm going to empower women businesses now. Again, you're doing it scared. Yeah. So a lot of that is teaching women like, hey, if we don't do it scared, we're not growing. And so ultimately, in order for us to break through that ceiling, we have to just keep going. And I always say that gut feeling that you feel like it's really uncomfortable. That's when you know you have to keep going. That's when you're making progress. So ultimately, we're teaching women, or we need to teach our women entrepreneurs, you have to do it scared. You have to.
That's right. It is so much of the road is mindset, right? And, I have been a lifelong learner. I am definitely in the personal growth space from the time I was in my 20s, right? Always looking, reading, tons of business books, just always kind of, but I see that as I've gotten older, one of the things that I can bring to this is because I lived my life and built my business in a very patriarchal type of structure, right? And I've adapted to that. That is how I show up. If you had seen me 10 years ago, you would have said warrior, because I was so disconnected from my own heart, my own drive. And that is on the same side for men, right? We all need to get to the point where we can embrace those parts of ourselves that don't walk in lockstep with the rest of how society thinks we ought to show up, right? That's a prison for men who aren't able to, kind of take their feminine, in quotes, qualities, right? And bring them into the workplace. And it's a prison for women who have built their whole facade based on sort of this idea of how you need to be a leader. And we're missing out on the beauty that comes from the mix. Right?
So true.
You have to have both sides of that equation. And we as women have to step into our own sort of leadership and lead from a place of our comfort and our strengths, and not where somebody said we should be.
Exactly. And not trying to copy into what male-dominated leadership is supposed to look like. Because it doesn't mean it's the right way that it's been done. And we know that, right? In so many ways. Yeah. So, and then we can, as males too, men can learn from women and their new form of leadership and how they show up. And then we all find that kind of balance. And as a girl dad, like I mentioned earlier, to a 4-year-old, like I'm teaching her finance. She's got her 401k, her LLC. She's the boss. She knows it. So trying to like do that subconscious reprogramming for, the toddler age is huge. So that way when she grows up, and I think her generation, it'll be much different, but obviously it's been a slow kind of evolution for all of us over the decades,
That's what I thought, that it would be better for me, right?
Exactly, yeah. And it's like it's moving a little bit, but it's a lot slower than we expect. Yeah, exactly.
Regeneration.
We're forward, backwards. We almost had it. Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. Yeah.
But that's one of the things that I love when I see young girls, and I do see this more than when I was young, and I would definitely have been called precocious, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm the one hanging with the adults, chatting it up, wanting to talk politics and things that kids that were 10 didn't do, right? But I think that what I see that's different is that there is a burgeoning sense of power within our children that we need to learn to nurture instead of drown out.
Yeah.
And everything about our society is about drowning that out, from the way they're educated to, and so I love that you're teaching your girls about entrepreneurship, because I do believe that, it's not a belief, it's what statistics show, is women build economies. They literally do. When women succeed at a high level, they put the money, not that there's anything wrong with buying a Porsche, but they don't put their money into a Porsche.
Exactly.
They put their money into their kids, their kids' education, into other community resources. And we would all be better off for that. But I think we're stuck in this weird place. And for me, as somebody who kind of has walked through this for a while, I think it's incumbent on women my age who are sort of were in that kind of high Gen Z, low boomer it's cohort, right? Where we can really build a bridge and help the people behind us sort of reach their level. I think it's shocking when I heard that only 4% of women had businesses over $1 million. I was like, what? That is wrong. Because I know tons of amazing women entrepreneurs. And I also know a lot of women entrepreneurs whose successes never see the light of day because we don't give air to that kind of news that is important for other women to know all the great things that women, business owners are doing out there. I think it's really, really critical, and it's important for our kids to see that.
I agree. And
that's what breaks boundaries.
Absolutely. We have to be the change. And that's even, pouring into our kids now so they understand that they have the ability to be the change. But it ultimately starts with us. We know what needs to be done, and we have to get out there and do it.
Absolutely.
You've had such an incredible career. Have you seen, even though it's the 4%, still it's not enough. Are you so excited about where it's trending and like how much you've seen improve with that in the last?
Yeah, I go back and forth. So, definitely it's different than when I first started my career. I had a broadcasting career completely unrelated to law. Went back to law as a much older student, right? Had my kids after I was already a brand new spanking young lawyer, which anybody who knows, like associate world, that is really tough to be trying to juggle, kids and that new career. And in fact, when I adopted my first child, I will never forget, I had stellar reviews up until that point. And then I got the old, you just seem disorganized. So, I think, yes, I've seen a lot of change, and I'm stoked about what I am stoked about is the building of women's communities. I see more and more women building their own communities and communities of women who are entrepreneurs, who are whatever it is that's important to you, that sense of community and that tribe of women who really have your back and your success. I think that's the key for women in order to really succeed at a high level is they need to know that. So yes, I've seen things that have been really, really promising, but also we've had a lot of setbacks, a lot of them. And that's really distressing that we're having the same conversations that we had when I was a kid or in high school. That kills my heart. It really does, because I know there are a lot of good people trying to do good things, but we don't do ourselves any favors when we force people to fit into boxes where they don't really belong. I mean, women should be able to lead from where they're leading from. They shouldn't. That's one of the things that I think, and why I started my own business is because for all the time that I was a lawyer, up until starting my own business, it was how do we get more women into the big law firms? We're still sub 5% when I started, and now we're still sub 10%, right, at firms, partnership track. And finally, at some point, I was like, guess what? I'm abandoning that because sometimes you can't move the river. Sometimes you have to get in the river and let the river take you where the river's going to take you, right? And I think that rather than try to force change upon some of these institutions that are not going to change or not changing at the speed with which we'd like them to, we got to start our own, right?
Absolutely.
We got to do our own thing. Yeah.
I love that. I could continue this conversation all day. For those of the listeners that are tuning into this episode, what would be the best way to connect with you? Can you share with them?
Yes, absolutely. Well, right now, you'd connect with me through my law firm, which is www.frameworklegal.com. But also, you'll find me Framework Legal on Instagram. You'll find me personally on Instagram, on Facebook, where all the old people hang out, and not on TikTok. So
you're in your 30s, right?
Right. I'm in my 30s. My God, I got gray when I was 13. So yeah.
It's the hip thing in the 30s to dye your hair silver, right?
It is.
Right. It is hip. Right?
And the career in broadcast clearly shows you were so good at this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I can see this right here.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate you so much for joining us and sharing a little bit more about the direction and what you're really passionate about at this point. And those of you that are tuning into this episode, we'll have all the links in the comments and the descriptions and everything. And we really appreciate all of you. Please leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we'll see you in the next episode.